Hello everyone, I'm Josh Gordon. I'm here with my dad, Jerry Gordon. How are you doing today?
Wonderful.
Okay, that's great. So we're just gonna ask you some questions about racing and like your racing career.
What kind of racing?
That's a good question. That's why I have to get to know more about you. So how did you get into racing?
My dad started taking me to auto races when I was probably 8, 9, 10 years old, and then that morphed into my dad building his own car and going to local racetracks. We'd go to the Indy 500 once a year and stand around down there, and then my dad thought that I had too great an interest in that, so he sold everything off, which kind of made it worse. So then I went and found jobs that required that I go to the racetrack and do racing stuff, and I don't know, that ended up me working hard to get a job decent enough so I could pay for my own stuff. And then when I got married, your mom said basically, why don't you just get one of those racing jobs? You don't have to do all this other stuff. So that's what I did for the last 20 odd years.
Okay, nice. So what was your primary role in racing?
Well, if you're in a profession long enough, you do all the different jobs. So I've done everything from the most remedial tasks to the most technical. You as you change jobs, you go from team to team, or you do different things. You pick up skills as you go along, and I don't know. I've done everything from load the truck to, I think the only thing I haven't done is drive the truck to the racetrack. I've kind of done all the other jobs,
Yeah.
race engineering, electronics, mechanics, all of it.
So like when you went to the track, what would like a typical day look like?
Well, it depends on what you're doing. There is no typical day. Your job there is to do what your assigned task is at the highest level possible, and don't screw up. That's probably the most important thing, is to make sure that when that car goes out there, that some mistake hasn't been made that will prevent it from going around.
Mm-hmm. What kind of skills did you need to be part of a racing team?
You need all kinds of different skills. You have to be you need some technical skills, you need mechanical skills. Believe it or not, you need some, for my aspect of it, some engineering skills. And then it really comes down to a lot of times having common sense and being able to work when you're really tired and not make mistakes. And then you have to be, in auto racing in general at the professional level, you have to be a bit of a self-promoter also, because if you're not, there'll be somebody else promoting themselves better than you, and you'll get cast aside.
Mm-hmm. So how would you prepare a car for a race?
It depends on what type of racing you're doing. Preparing the car, you want people working on the car and touching the car on a regular basis, their job, that they're doing it at a very high level so that there's no mistakes made. It's hard to not emphasize enough that winning doesn't come from this crazy high level potential. It's just minimizing the potentials to make mistakes. In professional auto racing today, you have a number of people that are involved with the car. Each one needs to have a high level skill and a high attention to detail, and if they don't possess that detail, that could be something that could stop the car from going around. I mean, once the car leaves the pit lane, it's in the hands of the driver. So then the driver needs to have that same high level attention to detail, and hopefully if all the non-mistakes fall together, you have a good day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. What kind of technology or equipment would you frequently use?
Well, you'd think in auto racing that mechanics would be like a wrench or a hammer would be probably the most important tool, but at the end of the day, it's probably the computer. I mean, you spend so much time looking at data and analyzing what the car's done while it has run, that you need to be able to decipher from that information what changes are made and what needs to happen.
What's your favorite racing team that you've worked for?
I don't know. They're all fun to some point. You get to the point to where it really comes. A lot of times, the goal is always the same. You want to win or finish up front and win championships. And if that doesn't ever happen, or there's mistakes made, that kind of overshadows whether or not you liked or disliked something. I don't really have a favorite, and then it's like the favorite one could be one that's yet to come. I don't know. I haven't. I don't know. I don't ever look at it like that.
Okay. Are there any interesting or famous people you've met while racing?
Well, what do you consider famous or interesting? What I would consider interesting might be a lot less interesting to other people.
Like celebrities, I guess.
I mean, it's funny, the day-to-day, you don't ever see a celebrity or a famous person unless they're the person behind the wheel of the car. All the famous people come out for the beginning of the Indianapolis 500, and then you never see them again until 365 days later, and then they show up again. You meet celebrities, or you see them. They wear pants and they do the same stuff we do. It's I don't know. I will say, I mean, there hasn't been that many that I went, oh wow, but we had Dan Gurney's son on one of the teams I worked for, and Dan Gurney came to many of the races, and he was a well-known, very early 60s Formula One driver when those guys were sort of like daredevils. They were fearless, and he was a very large gentleman. He's probably 6'5" and had big, huge hands. I would say that Dan Gurney, I mean, he's pretty much done it all in racing. I would say that was probably one of the most famous people that I've met that I kind of went, wow, that's really cool. Some of the other people that I thought, as a kid, I idolized, wasn't all that impressed with when I met them. So, you never know. Sometimes the idols that you idolize as a kid aren't really idols.
Yeah, I've heard the saying, never meet your idols, something like that.
Yeah, some of that's true,
So what are some of the favorite places that you've traveled to?
Well, I liked going to Australia. We used to go to Australia with championship auto racing team's cart once a year, and it was really torture because the city that we went to was called Surfers Paradise, so it was on a beach in Australia, but a lot of times I'd have to go down there for preliminaries to work with other teams, and you'd spend like a month down there. They eat really good. They eat lots of red meat, and they drink lots of beer, and they're just interesting people. And I liked going down there. Japan was interesting, and believe it or not, I'm not a fan of American Mexican food, but I liked going to Mexico because it was different, But unfortunately now racing, there's areas in the world where you can't go because it's dangerous. We used to go to Brazil once a year, can't go there anymore. We don't go to Mexico anymore because that got really dangerous. I don't know why IndyCar stopped going to Japan and Australia. I guess it all comes down to money,
Yeah. So what are some of the biggest challenges you've had to overcome in racing?
The longer that you do something, the better you get at your skill. And probably the thing that you struggle with the most is being able to do what you need to do when you're like exhausted, when you're like really tired. You're so susceptible that to race cars professionally at a high level, it's all about not making a mistake. So if you can do what you need to, usually when you're exhausted, and not make mistakes, you're doing very well. That's something that you don't learn overnight, and you have to kind of pace yourself, and you have to know when you got to have your own checks and balances in place so you don't make a mistake. That's the biggest part. That's the biggest trick of all this. You know?
Can you tell me about like one of your favorite races, or maybe successful ones?
Well, any race, when you leave the racetrack and your car number's at the top of the podium, that's a successful finish. But it always doesn't happen like that. I mean, we've towards the end of my career, I raced in sports car, which has endurance racing as a focus in that series. So you race for anywhere from 6 to 24 hours is considered an endurance race. And how you approach those races is a lot different than how you approach a 4-hour sprint race or a 3-hour sprint race. So highs and lows. I don't know. I don't have one that really stands out. We won the Rolex 24 at Daytona, which is a 24-hour race at Daytona. It was the actual, believe it or not, it was the first race that I actually did with Porsche. But I had a long successful career at GM, and then when I jumped to Porsche, a lot of the information and skills that I used there and kind of perfected were something that worked good at Porsche. So we had a good long run there of success. Everyone that's in auto racing always wants to be able to say they won the Indy 500, you know, and I have an old friend that I used to work with, and he calls me every year after the Indy 500 is over, and he said, "You didn't win the Indy 500. So I find that kind of entertaining, but also, yeah, definitely grate you. But you give up a lot personally to focus on IndyCar at that level. I probably wouldn't have the house and the family and the things that I've done if all I did was focus on trying to win that race in IndyCar. So yeah. There's a balance in life where even if you're trying to work at the high level, some of that stress and fuss and fight, you know, you have to decide if that's for you, you know. Mm-hmm. And at that point in my life, I decided that it wasn't. So would I like to win the Indy 500? Yeah. Does anybody that ever goes to that racetrack and stands there? Yeah. And do I think I could have at some point? Sure, but I didn't stay there and stick to it, you know. So yeah. I went and worked for other teams in other areas where, I won't say it was easier, but the stress was different, you know.
Yeah.
So.
All right, well, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for coming and talking with me, and thank you for watching.